Sea level rise is a global issue that is already impacting coastal communities, but has the potential to increase exponentially in the coming years if this ice sheet continues to melt. This is the Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica, often for better or worse referred to as the DOOMSDAY Glacier, as it has the potential to lead to 10 feet of global sea level rise if it disappears.
Even though we think of this place as being far away and at the bottom of the world, we impact it and it impacts us. And so it's not really that far away.
Let's explore exactly why this glacier is important and what the solutions are going forward.
In the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years, we're going to see this ice shelf changing really rapidly and disintegrating.
72% of the Earth is covered by ocean. And we love living next to it, but honestly, the relationship has gotten a little complicated. On average, sea level is currently rising about 1.4 inches per decade. That rate is projected to increase as global temperatures warm. And one of the most important tipping points is the leading edge of the Thwaites Glacier.
There's a chunk of ice that's the size of Florida, and it's melting so fast that it's responsible for 4% of global sea level rise each year. That's the reality of Antarctica's Thwaites Glacier, a colossal mass of ice that's disappearing before our eyes, earning it the ominous nickname of the Doomsday Glacier. The first thing to understand about the Thwaites Glacier is its incredible size. Spanning 74,000 square miles, it's part of the West Antarctic ice sheet that rests on the bedrock below sea level. But Thwaites isn't just big, it's a vital buttress. Floating ice shelves extend from the glacier, acting like a cork in a bottle, slowing the flow of ice into the ocean. As we'll see, these natural breaks are beginning to fail.
Right now, Thwaites is barely hanging on. In the past 30 years, the front of Thwaites' ice shelf has lost a lot of ice, causing it to retreat backwards. With a smaller ice shelf to slow the flow of ice, the flow of the glacier speeds up. But the bigger problem is the glacier's grounding line, the final point where the glacier rests on the bedrock. That grounding line has been shifting backwards as warm ocean water reaches underneath the ice shelf. It's moved 14 kilometers since 1992. So ice that used to be on land becomes ice that is floating on water, raising sea levels. The downhill slope of the bedrock means that as the grounding line moves back, it lifts an even bigger slice of ice behind it off the land and into the water, and that accelerates the flow of the glacier into the sea. The amount of ice flowing from Thwaites has doubled over the past 30 years and already contributes 4% to global sea level rise. And scientists have recently detected a huge cavity, 2/3 the size of Manhattan, down here. Scientists believe this could mean Thwaites' collapse is inevitable. How soon that happens is hotly debated.
So why is the glacier disintegrating so quickly? For starters, warming ocean water is eating away at the underside of the ice shelves. Just a tiny 0.1 degrees Celsius ocean temperature rise speeds up undersea melting by 1 meter per year. But that's where it gets really scary. Thwaites ice rests on a downward slope. As the ice retreats, taller and taller cliffs are exposed to the warming sea.
One of the biggest surprises for us as part of putting our robot through the ice and measuring what the water column was like was learning just how warm and salty it is underneath this ice. It's a couple degrees above its freezing point.
Models show that once the shelves are gone, water could penetrate almost 4 miles beneath the glacier, putting the melt rate into overdrive. In fact, ice dumping into the ocean from Thwaites has already doubled since the 1990s.
All of the water that we're talking about is pretty cold, but to the ice, that's like putting a blowtorch underneath it, because that water is able to have so much melting impact just by being a couple of degrees above freezing.
So now you might be thinking, sure, it's a big glacier, but why is one glacier such a big deal? Well, Thwaites is like the keystone in an arch. It holds back enough ice to raise global sea levels over 2 feet. But it gets worse from there. Thwaites also acts as a barrier protecting neighboring glaciers.
Thwaites is a big, thick glacier. It flows out into the ocean and forms an ice shelf. And that's the floating part of the glacier. And that floating part runs into an island. And you can imagine that acts kind of like a dam. The ice shelf itself, when it falls apart, doesn't actually contribute to sea level rise because it's already floating in the ocean. But as it breaks apart, it's no longer this stabilizing force for all of the ice behind it. The dam is crumbling away. And so this huge volume of ice on land behind it can speed up and flow into the ocean a lot more rapidly. And so that's why we're focusing so much on this one little corner, because it's stabilizing this system right now.
If this glacier goes, it could trigger a chain reaction, destabilizing much of the West Antarctic ice sheet. We're talking over 10 feet of sea level rise in the coming centuries, a catastrophe for coastal megacities and low-lying islands worldwide. The latest science paints a shocking picture. Thwaites' remaining ice shelves could collapse within a mere 5 years, causing the glacier's ice loss to jump from 4% to 5% of the annual sea level rise. But it gets even scarier. A complete shelf collapse could set off a runway effect called marine ice cliff instability. Towering cliffs of ice, no longer buttressed by shelves, would crumble under their own weight in a devastating feedback loop. In this worst-case scenario, we could lose the entire glacier in just 200 to 900 years. Let that sink in. And trust me, I know this information can seem overwhelming and cause a lot of eco-anxiety. One of the greatest challenges in communicating the climate crisis is threading the needle between urgency and hope, a wake-up call and a roadmap forward. The last thing I want is for these reports to paralyze any of you watching with despair. So let's start to talk about some solutions.
The reason why the term Doomsday Glacier is not one that I really like is that it implies there's nothing to be done. I think that is one of the most insidious and dangerous attitudes that we can have, that we are doomed, that there is no turning back, that there's nothing to be done. There are an enormous number of things that we can do, both as a society and to a lesser extent as individuals. I think the right way to do this is to approach this as a community, as a government, as a nation, and then the many nations around the globe.
While some ice loss from the Thwaites Glacier is already locked in, our choices today will hugely impact the trajectory of future sea level rise. By rapidly cutting greenhouse gas emissions, we can still put the brakes on runaway melting. Some scientists are even exploring radical engineering projects to stabilize key glaciers like Thwaites, using massive underwater walls and artificial sills to buy precious time. Ultimately, preserving a livable climate demands a wholesale transition away from fossil fuels. We also have a part to play, from pressuring leaders and businesses to change course, to transforming our own energy use, consumption, and transportation habits. The more we can limit long-term warming, the more ice we can save. At 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius of warming, much of the Thwaites Glacier could remain frozen for centuries. But if we hit 3 degrees Celsius or more, a collapse becomes almost inevitable.
Dangerous climate change has arrived, so the question is, how bad are we willing to let it get? And there is fairly widespread recognition that if we can keep the warming of the planet below about 1.5 degrees Celsius, that's about 3 degrees Fahrenheit, there's still time to prevent the worst changes from happening.
I hope this journey into the heart of the Thwaites Glacier has revealed both the high stakes and the agency we still have to shape the future. In telling this story, my goal is never to paralyze, but always to empower. By confronting hard truths and envisioning a better path, we can write the ending we want to see in this tale. As always, let me know what other climate topics you want to see. Thanks for watching, and let's all get to work to improve our climate and our environment. And if you want to see more information about these topics, you can find them in the description below, and I'll see you all in the next one.